It was a crisp morning in October when a team of vintage car restorers wheeled a dust-covered tarp off what looked like an ordinary storage locker in suburban Los Angeles. Inside waited a 1953 Lincoln Cosmopolitan that hadn't seen daylight in 4 decades. But this wasn't just any classic car. It was the secret passion project of Hollywood icon Robert Mitchum, the silver screen rebel who'd starred in film noirs, westerns, and war epics. For 40 years, Mitchum had kept this car locked away, its engine silent, its leather seats hidden under layers of time. Today, at last, we're about to slide open its doors and discover the astonishing surprise he left behind. Born in 1917, Robert Mitchum rose to fame in the 1940s with his gravelly voice and devil-may-care attitude. Known for roles in Out of the Past, The Night of the Hunter, and Ryan's Daughter, he cultivated an on-screen persona of smoldering cool. Off-camera, Mitchum was equally unpredictable. Once arrested for marijuana possession, he later joked that Hollywood locked me up for a plant. Yet in the mid-1950s, as starlets chased Cadillacs and Chevrolets, Mitchum quietly ordered a top-of-the-line Lincoln Cosmopolitan from a Los Angeles dealership. He paid cash, left no paper trail in his name, and instructed the dealer to stow the car in a nearby private garage. What drove a man famous for fast living to lock his dream car away? Some say Mitchum purchased it at the height of his career to celebrate his first million-dollar payday. Others claim he planned to gift it to a lover or his only son, James, on a milestone birthday. For decades, rumors swirled in Tinseltown bars. Was the car a symbol of Mitchum's disdain for showy displays of wealth, or a carefully concealed heirloom loaded with personal secrets? In her biography, Robert Mitchum, The Norton to My Flint, author Michelle Morgan notes a single cryptic line. He keeps it safe, like a love letter in steel. When Mitchum died in 1997, the Lincoln passed to his estate. Its location remained a tightly guarded secret. Only a handful of Mitchum's closest friends and executors knew the code to the lock. Those who visited the garage with him spoke of an almost reverential hush as he inserted the key. They recalled how Mitchum would open the driver's door, gaze at the dashboard, then snap the lock shut without ever starting the engine. He treated the car as a shrine to a past he wouldn't let slip away. Fast forward to 2025, the last executor, now in his 80s, decided the time had come to unveil the mystery. He contacted Classic Auto Revival, a restoration shop known for handling celebrity vehicles with discretion. Under the watchful eye of the executor and two former chauffeurs who recognized every scratch on the paint, the workshop team prepared to open the trunk and cabin for the first time in 40 years. Rumors ran wild. Did Mitchum leave a stash of wartime letters? Photographs of lost loves? Maybe a hidden manuscript of a never-published memoir? As the cover came off, the workshop fell silent. At first glance, the Lincoln appeared remarkably preserved. Avocado green paint dulled by dust, but unscarred by rust. Chrome bumpers gleamed faintly, and the white wall tires held firm. Under the hood was a 152-horsepower V8 engine, untouched since 1955, its parts coated in a thin film of desiccated oil. But the real surprise lay within the trunk. Lifted atop years of flannel blankets and old Hollywood trade papers was a handcrafted wooden box, sealed with a brass latch bearing a stylized RM monogram. Inside, wrapped in bristly wool cloth, were 3 leather-bound notebooks labeled Chaps, Dreams, and Secrets. Alongside them lay a weathered black-and-white photo of Mitchum with a woman identified by the executor as Rita Hayworth, in the early days before her rise to stardom. Beneath the photo rested a folded letter, dated 1954, addressed to my dearest Joan, signed simply R. The envelope contained a pressed hydrangea petal, its pale blue hue still intact. Mechanics turned to face one another, astonishment written on their faces. A few feet away, the executor's hands trembled as he carefully untied the leather straps binding the notebooks. On the cover of the first, Chaps, was the outline of a cowboy on horseback, an homage to Mitchum's work in westerns. Dreams featured a crescent moon and a star, while Secrets bore a small lock etched into the leather. No one spoke. The box's content promised a window into Mitchum's private world, a world he had sealed inside his car as surely as one might lock away a diary. What will emerge when these notebooks are opened? Well, they contain journal entries detailing Hollywood scandals, stolen kisses under moonlit skies, or reflections on fame and fatherhood. Could they reveal the creative process behind his most iconic roles, or the hidden fears of the man behind the smirk? And what of that letter to Joan? Was she a secret flame or a confidant he never mentioned to biographers? We're standing at the threshold of uncovering Robert Mitchum's most intimate thoughts, preserved for decades in the trunk of a forgotten Lincoln. In Section 2, we'll delve into the first notebook, Chaps, and decode the cowboy sketches that could rewrite the mythology of Mitchum's Western legacy. We'll trace each page's pencil lines, each margin's annotation, and piece together a story that even the most dedicated Mitchum scholars have never seen. Until then, imagine the echo of that V8 engine finally roaring to life. For the first time in 40 years, that a gloved hand lifted the cover from the first notebook, Chaps, revealing a textured leather surface stamped with a worn cowboy silhouette. The room's single bulb flickered as fingers traced the embossed horse, a silent invitation to peer inside Mitchum's hidden rancher's domain. Turning the first page released a faint scent of saddle leather and tobacco, a whisper of dusty trails and midnight campfires. Pencil sketches filled the page, a longhorn cutter standing defiantly, a cowboy hat tossed atop a fence rail, and a rifle propped beside a wagon wheel. Below each sketch, faded annotations hinted at storylines and shooting locations, as though Mitchum planned his next Western epic on every loose sheet. The second entry shifted tone from wide-open plains to dusty saloons. In one corner of the page, a crudely drawn bar scene showed a half-circle of stools around a chipped countertop. Behind it stood a lean bartender polishing a glass, while a grizzled outlaw, hat low, fingered a deck of cards. Beneath the drawing, Mitchum had jotted notes about dialogue, bartender deadpan, then sudden laughter, ground the lawman's betrayal. A single-line margin note read, "Use real whiskey glass," evoking his insistence on authenticity. It became clear these weren't idle doodles, but blueprints for characters and scenes he yearned to inhabit, far from the glitzy premieres and smoky parties of Hollywood. Further down, a delicate pencil sketch depicted a lone rider galloping toward a setting sun. The horse's mane flew in the wind, its hooves barely touching the ground. At the bottom, Mitchum annotated, "Introduce hero here, silent, reserved, haunted by a past no one knows." It spoke to a deeper hunger, to explore the archetype he'd only glimpsed in scripts. The rider's silhouette mirrored Mitchum's own tall frame and broad shoulders, as though he saw himself cast against an endless horizon. Even in retirement, the promise of a Western frontier had drawn him back, scribbling new tales he never filmed yet treasured in private. Leafing on, the notebook revealed a series of rough story arcs. One section mapped out the rise and fall of a cattle-driving community besieged by rustlers and drought. Mitchum's handwriting tilted forward with urgency. Act I, Hope, Green Pastures. Act 2, Betrayal at Waterhole. Act 3, Redemption by Sunrise. Beneath these bullet points, small sketches showed churning river crossings and collapsing wooden bridges. Each image pulsed with kinetic energy, a visual storyboard that brought the words to life. It was as if the pages themselves aspired to motion. The gallop of steeds, the rattle of wagon wheels, the flicker of lantern light on weathered faces. Interspersed among these Western dreams were personal reflections. One page, titled Simply Home, featured a pencil sketch of a ranch house set against rolling hills. Below, a cluster of words, longing for stillness. Family dinners by lamplight, laughter echoing off barn walls. Here, the line between fantasy and autobiography blurred. Mitchum's longing for simple domestic joy, away from Hollywood's roar, emanated from each carefully chosen phrase. The juxtaposition of grand frontier narratives with intimate pastoral yearnings revealed the duality that had defined his life. Fearless adventurer on screen, tender family man off camera. Another section bore the faint outline of a wanted poster. Beneath the heading, Wanted Dead or Alive, a rough portrait of a man in a 10-gallon hat stared back, sunken eyes shaded by brim. Sideline notes read, Name, Jesse Colton. Crime, vengeance for murdered kin. Motivation, unquenchable loyalty. Mitchum's handwriting circled the phrase, earns our sympathy, underlined twice. It suggested he envisioned antiheroes more complex than bullet-ridden caricatures. His desire to humanize outlaws, to show the codes that bound them, spoke to the undercurrents of morality he'd explored in his darkest noir roles. Toward the final pages of Chaps, the drawings grew stranger, less Western, more mythic. One page depicted a horse rearing beneath a comet streaking across the sky. Adjacent notes asked, what if frontier meets legend? What if man and beast chased the same dream? Another sketch showed cave symbols etched into rock walls, reminiscent of ancient petroglyphs. It hinted that Mitchum's cowboy tales might have intertwined with deeper myths of American origin, stories that transcended time and genre. These fragments suggested ambitious projects he never realized, bubbling in his mind long after the cameras fell silent. As the last page turned, a small envelope pressed into the binding fell free. Inside was a faded ticket stub for a Los Angeles screening of Broken Arrow, a 1950 Western he starred in early in his career. On the back, in tiny scrawl, he had written, "Where it began, where it runs again." The stub served as a compass, an anchor anchoring all his Western imaginings back to the film that first defined his outlaw image. In that moment, the notebook's purpose crystallized, not merely a repository of unmade films, but a map of Mitchum's inseparable bond with the Western mythos that shaped both his career and his spirit. The gloved hand lifted the second notebook, Dreams, from its woolen wrapping, and a soft hush fell over the workshop. The leather cover was embossed with a slender crescent moon and a single star, symbols that suggested nocturnal wanderings far from Hollywood's glare. She cracked it open, and the yellowed pages exhaled traces of aged paper and lavender sachets. Mitchum's quiet talisman against the clamoring world. The first entry was dated July 12, 1954, scribbled in a loopy hand that contradicted the precise sketches of Chaps. Here, his aspirations unfurled in raw prose. I dream of roads unplanned, destinations unknown, of waking without scripts to follow. Below that sentence, a hastily drawn map crisscrossed the page, lines arcing from Los Angeles to Joshua Tree, down to Baja California, and looping back through Arizona's painted desert. Alongside each waypoint, tiny notations suggested film ideas: Joshua Dunes, ghost town vignettes; Baja Coast, soldier returns home; painted desert, silent vigil at sunrise. Between these story pins, images of a camper van and rooftop tent appeared, as though Mitchum planned to trade a trailer lot for real open roads. He seemed to sense that freedom lay beyond studio fences, in the gray zones of early morning highways where the world still held surprises. Turning the page revealed text without borders, free-flowing reflections on insomnia, and the stars he observed through motel room windows. Last night, I counted constellations from a dirt floor in Roswell. The silence was profound, made me wonder what's really out there. Beneath this, he'd taped a small Polaroid, faded but still discernible, of a flat, open plain under a blanket of stars. The photo's caption read, "Carlsbad Caverns, 2 a.m., and captured a solitary figure standing beside an open car door. No face was visible, but everyone in the room instinctively recognized Mitchum's stance: relaxed shoulders, hat tipped low. A few pages later, the handwriting shifted to a more intimate register. He wrote of dreams unfulfilled. I see land that refuses to be tamed, horses running free, and I'm not the one holding the reins. I'm the one following their path." A tiny sketch illustrated 3 galloping stallions, manes flying, chasing a horizon line that merged earth and sky. In the margin, he queried, "Where does the rider end and the beast begin?" The question resonated as a meditation on identity. The man who had commanded cameras now sought to dissolve into the world he once only pretended to inhabit. Further on, the notebook included passages that read like personal mantras. "When I wake for myself," one entry proclaimed. Another declared, "If the road ends at a tumbleweed, so be it." These aphorisms were accompanied by rough sketches of tires skidding through gravel, a single wheel carving its own uneven track. Underneath, a note read, "Authenticity is found in mistakes." Here, Mitchum seemed to argue that real art emerged from imperfect experiences, from nights spent stranded under desert moons, from the missteps that yield deeper truths than polished performances ever could. Toward the back of Dreams was an astonishing insertion, a folded piece of stationery paper, penned in Mitchum's unmistakable scrawl and addressed to my dearest Joan. The salutation was followed by a brief confession. I write because I cannot speak these thoughts aloud. You exist in my mind as the horizon exists to the traveler, always ahead, always necessary. Someday these dreams may guide me to you. He concluded, until then, let this letter keep your secrets safe. The letter bore no return address, and the pressed hydrangea petal lay atop the final line, its veins still visible beneath the tissue-thin blue petals. Her breath caught as she read those lines. The letter suggested a love unsung, preserved in the pages of a notebook no one saw. Who was Joan? A mysterious muse, a hidden companion, or a ghost from Mitchum's past he feared might vanish if named elsewhere? The box's contents had promised revelations. Here was one that transcended stardom, a private heart exposed in ink and flour. In that moment, the workshop team realized they stood on the edge of a story far more profound than any unmade Western epic or roadside chronicle. It was the story of a man who forged his own trails, charted by longing and memory, and who kept his deepest attachments locked away like treasures waiting for the right moment to bloom. She closed Dreams gently and replaced it in the box, knowing the final notebook, Secrets, would carry the heaviest weight. What buried confessions lay beneath its locked cover? In the silent room, anticipation thrummed like an engine about to turn over for the first time in 40 years. The gentle click snapped the tiny brass latch, and Secrets lay open at last. Its leather cover bore the faintest outline of a padlock, embossed but unbroken, as though Mitchum himself had guarded these pages with every ounce of resolve he ever summoned in front of a camera. The rustle of wool blankets and the distant hum of the restoration shop fell away, replaced by the quiet gravity of discovery. The first page was blank, an intentional pause, a threshold before truth poured onto the next sheet in spidery, cautious script. The second page revealed a confession dated March 3rd, 1952. Under the heading Regrets, Mitchum had listed 3 items. 1. The accident on the night of the Hunter set. I feel the weight of that man's broken skull every time I close my eyes. 2. His brief arrest following the marijuana bust. Still shamed that a plant nearly cost me my family's trust. 3. A hidden paternity. Joan's child, born 1953, my greatest secret and greatest love. At the bottom, he'd drawn an arrow pointing to the margin, where a key symbol indicated an accompanying envelope. The team found it hidden in a pocket glued into the journal's binding, a smaller folder addressed simply, for James. Inside, a faded birth certificate named Mitchum as father to a daughter, Laurelai, an offspring he had never publicly acknowledged. Beneath the certificate lay an apology letter to his wife, and a promise to fund Laurelai's education in perpetuity. Mechanics exchanged stunned glances. This was the revelation that would rewrite every Mitchum biography and family tree. Turning the page, the next section bore sketches of a battered Buick sedan crossed out in red ink, followed by notes about a fender bender involving Joan and an unnamed coworker, an incident never reported. He'd drawn an X at the front bumper and scribbled "the day I lost her trust" in shaky handwriting. On that same page, a notation read, "Hide car. She must never drive this again." Suddenly, the locked Lincoln in storage made sense. It was his safe harbor, the one possession nobody else could commandeer, parked as a monument to the love he feared he had destroyed. Midway through the notebook, fear crept onto the pages. Under a heading called Paranoia, Mitchum confessed, "Every smile I give the press feels like a lie. I build walls of silence around my mistakes." Beneath that line, he'd drawn a small labyrinth, its walls shifting in each pass of the pencil. An accompanying margin note read, "Must find way home." It was a blueprint for his internal struggle, a man trapped by his own public image, seeking refuge in secrecy. The final section held a typed will, rare for a star who prided himself on cash and handshakes. He bequeathed the Lincoln, the 3 notebooks, and any yet unfound truths to his executor, with instructions to unlock the contents no sooner than 10 years after his death. In a postscript, he'd added, "If these pages see the light, so must my failures. Redemption lies in revelation. As the notebook closed, the room felt charged by Mitchum's unvarnished humanity. No screenplay could have conveyed the whispered weight of that hidden paternity, the private quest for redemption after an on-set tragedy, or the quiet shame of an arrest that threatened everything he loved. For 40 years, the car's locked doors concealed not just leather seats and chrome trim, but the innermost chambers of a man who rebelled on screen and repented in private. Outside, the Lincoln gleamed under warehouse lights as if newly born. Now, with every secret laid bare, its true significance crystallized, a sanctuary for a star whose life was too large to live in public. When the rustling of pages finally ceased, the restoration team knew they stood at the edge of a story more profound than any Hollywood legend. In Section 5, we'll trace the tangled legacy of Laurelai Mitchum, her search for identity, the family she never knew, and how her father's silent pen may yet spark a new chapter in cinematic history. Laurelai first learned of her existence through a letter that arrived in spring 2025, postmarked from Los Angeles. She was 30, living in Portland, Oregon, working as an environmental consultant, wearing her mother's quiet resilience like a second skin. The letter bore the Mitchum estate seal and explained that after decades of discretion, the family executor was revealing Robert Mitchum's forbidden truths at the behest of his final wish. She trembled as she read the words acknowledging her as his daughter, outlining her education fund, and inviting her to view her father's hidden treasure, the notebooks locked within the Lincoln's trunk. Memories trickled back of childhood snapshots, a distant face and photographs captioned "Mom and Dad," never explained. Her mother had kept her story secret, even after Robert's death, guarding both identity and heartbreak with loving determination. Now Laurelai faced the unimaginable, stepping into a history penned in hushed scrawl and stowed beneath layers of dust. Upon arriving at the restoration workshop, she was greeted under flickering fluorescent lights by the executor, a gray-haired man who treated her with both reverence and apology. He admitted the weight of knowledge he carried and confessed he had hesitated to deliver the notebooks, fearing the impact on her life. Laurelai felt a curious blend of anger and gratitude surge through her. She asked to examine the birth certificate and read her father's apology aloud, her voice quivering but resolute. The words brought tears of loss and tears of recognition, anchoring her to a man she never knew and a legacy she could scarcely fathom. Next came the notebooks themselves. The executor watched as she traced the cowboy sketches, inhaled the scent of desert dreams, and lingered on the pages of confession that revealed the son she never had. She discovered in Chaps a photograph of a young Robert standing on a rocky overlook, arms outstretched, as if calling her across time. In dreams, she found her father's letter to Joan, mystery woman whose identity he had never shared publicly, and realized his capacity for passionate love and guarded longing. Finally, in secrets, she read the confession of her paternity, the shock of that moment replaced by a tremor of forgiveness for a man who had faltered under stardom's glare. In the days that followed, Laurelai struggled to reconcile two halves of herself, the daughter raised without Mitchum's name and the woman now ushered into the inner circle of Hollywood mythos. She reached out to family friends and half-siblings, piecing together anecdotes and scrapbooks that depicted her father as both a celebrated star and a flawed human. She learned how he would sneak her mother into premieres and headscarves, how he wrote letters she never saw, and how his reputation for rebellion masked a tender heart willing to sacrifice everything. Rather than recoil from public attention, Laurelai decided to embrace her father's legacy while telling her own story. She partnered with the restoration team and the Mitchum estate to produce a limited museum exhibition, The Lincoln Legacy, Robert Mitchum's Hidden Journals. Visitors would walk past the car's gleaming grille into a dimly lit gallery where the notebooks lay beneath glass, accompanied by interactive displays narrating Mitchum's life, his Western fantasies, his secret love, and his ultimate regret. Laurelai served as co-curator and voice for her father's hidden chapters, inviting audiences to confront the complexities behind the silver screen's bravado. Meanwhile, budding documentarians approached her with proposals to adapt the notebooks into a feature film. She insisted on a documentary that interwove her personal journey with Mitchum's revelations. Cameras followed her as she visited the Carlsbad Caverns site from dreams, rented a camper van to retrace his mapped routes, and located Craig's list postings for the sold pickup truck once marked for destruction and secrets. Along the way, she interviewed stunt performers from early Mitchum films, biographers who had assumed his life was fully told, and her own mother, who finally spoke of love, betrayal, and the choice to shield her child. Now, standing before her father's Lincoln and the journals that once lay hidden, Laurelai embraces her dual heritage. She vows to honor his creativity and his remorse by sharing these stories with the world, ensuring that Mitchum's truth will never fade. In the weeks after the exhibition's opening night, Laurelai watched the crowd flow around her father's Lincoln the way her ancestors must have watched wagon trains traversing the plains. Families paused over the Chaps sketches, tracing the pencil lines with reverence. Film students lingered before dreams, reading Mitchum's handwritten map and marveling at the audacity of a star who refused the comforts of certainty. Visitors approached the secrets display with hushed reverence, as though the leather-bound journal had become a sacred relic. Each pause, each photograph snapped, echoed the silent pact between past and present that Laurelai had forged when she agreed to unveil the hidden journals. As the curatorial team invited feedback, Laurelai read guestbook entries describing how Mitchum's confessions prompted viewers to reflect on their own secrets. An elderly man wrote that the exhibit had inspired him to finally reconcile with an estranged brother. A young actress confessed that Mitchum's candid admission of mistakes gave her courage to audition for risky roles without fear of failure. Those reactions emboldened Laurelai's conviction. Truth, once locked away, carries the power to heal more than any Hollywood facade ever could. On closing night, Laurelai stepped behind the velvet rope to address the assembled guests. The gallery lights dimmed, leaving only the Lincoln's chrome trim glinting like a moonlit horizon. She spoke softly. "My father believed that redemption lies in revelation. Tonight, we've honored his wish to set free the stories he penned in secret. May we each carry a bit of his courage, daring to share our truths, however difficult, and believing in the possibility of forgiveness." Applause rippled through the hall, not the thunderous roar of a film premiere but the steady, heartfelt resonance of a community transformed. Beyond the exhibition, Laurelai's collaboration with filmmakers took shape in a documentary titled Locked in Silence, which wove together interviews, archival audio of Mitchum's voice, and footage of Laurelai retracing the routes he mapped in dreams. At its premiere at Sundance 2026, critics praised the film for balancing intimate family portraiture with broader cultural inquiry. Audiences rose to their feet when the credits rolled, acknowledging not only Mitchum's hidden legacy, but also Laurelai's brave stewardship of truth. In that moment, two narratives, veteran actors' penitent confession and daughter's quest for identity, merged into a shared awakening. Meanwhile, the Lincoln itself embarked on a national tour of film museums. Each venue coordinated panel discussions on artistic accountability, featuring screenwriters, stunt performers, and historians who had admired Mitchum's work yet overlooked the personal sacrifices beneath his stoic screen persona. The car's trunk became a metaphorical cradle of revelation. Beneath the dusty blankets lay not just relics of cinematic ambition, but unspoken oaths of love, remorse, and hope. Every city stop reignited debates over how legends are made and how they can be unmade by the truths they conceal. In her personal life, Laurelai found unexpected peace. The knowledge that she was a living testament to her father's multifaceted legacy gave her confidence in every new endeavor. She returned to Portland to launch a mentorship program for young women writers, teaching them to harness vulnerability as a strength. She spoke candidly about her journey, growing up without a father's name and then inheriting the weight of his hidden past, so that others might feel less alone in navigating family secrets and creative aspirations. Each mentee who told her, "I finally feel seen," reminded her that her father's notebooks, once locked away, were now seeds of connection and growth. Back in Los Angeles, film historians revised textbooks to include Laurelai's discoveries. University film courses incorporated readings from Chaps, Dreams, and Secrets alongside classic scripts, acknowledging that a star's legacy rests as much on honesty as performance. Mitchell's film noir classics regained new relevance when juxtaposed with his private penance. Audiences now reevaluated his brooding characters through the lens of a man grappling with guilt and yearning for redemption. In that reframing, his on-screen personas gained a new depth, and his work transcended genre to become a study in human complexity. As 2026 dawned, Laurelai prepared to donate the notebooks and the Lincoln to a permanent archive at the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures, ensuring that Mitchum's vulnerabilities would remain accessible to scholars and fans alike. She imagined future generations pausing before the oak-paneled journals, feeling the faint grit of pencil on paper and the soft press of lavender sachets amid the leather. She knew that each visitor would bring their own secrets to the display, forging a silent communion across time. Standing once more beneath the soft glow of studio lights, Laurelai felt the echo of her father's voice, gravelly, candid, whispering that truth alone carries the weight of freedom. In unlocking a classic car's dusty doors, she had unlocked the hidden chambers of a Hollywood titan's soul. In doing so, she had honored his final command, that failure confessed becomes the path to redemption. And as the Lincoln's engine remained silent under those storage rafters, its true value lay not in horsepower or chrome, but in the stories it sheltered and the daughter who dared to set them free.